There is a fascinating question in the epic fantasy Lord of the Rings. It's from a dialogue between two characters in the story, Sam and Frodo. Now, Sam and Frodo, if you don't know, are hobbits, halflings, little small human-like creatures who are the unlikely heroes of this adventure. These hobbits are on a quest, a grand task to destroy an all-powerful ring, but things aren't going well. They're having to struggle with giant spiders and gruesome orcs. Now comes the most dangerous part of their journey. They have to climb this high mountain, and there are unknown evil powers ahead. They have been tempted to turn back several times because this quest is so daunting. And so the conversation between these two weary hobbits who have torn clothes and smudged faces, they begin talking about their journey and trying to make sense of it. And they recall other stories of people who went through exhausting and dangerous trials. Frodo says that of the adventure tales that he's read, some of them do seem to have a happy ending, and some have a sad ending. One of the problems, he says, is that the characters in the book, they don't know what kind of story, how it's going to end up, because they're right in the midst of it. So Sam asks, Mr. Frodo, I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. There's the question. I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. It's really hard for them to answer because they're right in the middle of it. They don't know how it's going to come to pass. Is it going to be a happy ending? Is it going to be a sad ending? Are they going to be able to complete their task? It looks pretty daunting at that moment. They don't know. How will things turn out? When the hobbit Sam wonders, happy ending or sad ending, that is one simple way to actually categorize stories. In a more classical dramatic terms, now this is very general, we can describe stories as either tragedies or comedies. Tragedy, plenty of good things can happen in a tragedy. There can be love and friendship and courage. Think of Romeo and Juliet, have all those things. What it's a tragedy is when it comes to the end, because things end up a mess. You can tell it's a tragedy in Shakespeare by the number of dead bodies on the stage when the curtain falls. In the end of a tragedy, it's a dispiriting loss. Now, a comedy, now this is in traditional terms, doesn't mean that it's continually ha-ha funny or filled with humor. There can be plenty of chaos and heartache in a comedy. The big reveal is the ending. How do things turn out? It's a comedy in Shakespeare when it ends in a wedding or a banquet. When the drama's played out, things come together. In the end of a traditional comedy, there is reunion, reconciliation, and joy. So now the question can turn to us, my friends here gathered this morning, or even human beings in general. I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. It's going to be a little hard at times to know, because We're actually right in the middle of it. Where are we heading? How are things going to turn out? What is the story of our life, both as individuals and also as a people? There are plenty of good things to celebrate, right? Caring people and beauty and joy and friendship, of course. And we look around and we see plenty of trials. The world can seem quite a mess. Does it feel like sometimes things are getting more divided and more mistrust all the time? Plenty of uphill struggles in the midst of our daily grind. There's poverty, there are wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And we might even have personal reasons to despair. Money troubles or illness. Even ways that we choose poorly and hurt people. And death. Can we say that? Can we admit that? That the grave is the end for all of us. When we start to think about it, it can be pretty overwhelming. In a modern twist, it might seem at times not that we're living in a story that's a tragedy. I mean, it's just meaningless. Tragedy at least has a point. Maybe there is no point. Maybe it was just a random happenstance of atoms that collided together and DNA mixed together, and that's how we got here. We're just kidding ourselves to think that there's any point or direction. Maybe we're living in an absurd story. Maybe when you're in the midst of it, it's a little hard to tell what story we've fallen into. One of the reasons we gather on a Sunday morning is to hear the story of Jesus. And if you read the Gospels, Jesus had plenty of hardships and loss, particularly near the end. On that last Friday, they arrest him and the disciples abandon him, and it seems like the worldly powers have won their day and they've crushed him, and he lays dead in a tomb. If the curtain came down on Friday night, this story would indeed be a tragedy. But my friends, we are blessed to come to church on this particular morning, this great feast of Easter, to hear more of the story. Because we hear in the gospel that early on that Sunday morning, yes, the women came to the tomb in tears, but that was not the end for Jesus. God raised him up. He is risen, the angel says. The worldly powers could not defeat him. In the resurrection of Jesus, God opened a new way of life for people. There was this terrible event, yes, and God transformed it into a way of salvation and a way to set Jesus' Spirit loose in the world. His story, it is our story. We Christians say it is the story. And on Easter, God has revealed the plot ending. The gospel of Jesus Christ actually tells us what kind of story we have fallen into. We are in a resurrection story. Not a tragedy, not an absurd tale. Death, yes. Loss, yes. But in the end, they don't win the day. The good news of Jesus is in the end, there will be joy and liberation and delight. In this Easter event, God has won the universal and final victory. And that is why we sing out today, Alleluia. So what are we to do, you and I, if really the story we've fallen into ends with new life? That's really the story. Well, we can trust that God's Spirit is at work, even when there is darkness all around us. And so we don't lose hope, and hope is crucial to hang on to. We can face long odds and obstacles. We can even seek, each of us, to try to be a part of this bigger drama of Jesus, this sacred adventure. God is working around us to bring about healing and peace, sometimes around us, and maybe sometimes through us. We're invited to take up our part, knowing that our little acts of kindness really do make a difference. Our prayer, our words of faith, our generosity, they go to something. On an Easter Sunday, we must not ignore the tragic elements of life. Challenges will come. Disappointment, traumas, injustice. How are things going to turn out? When we're in the middle of it, it's a little hard to know where things are going. Oh, how we need the proclamation of Easter to know what kind of tale we've fallen into. A resurrection story where death is defeated, where the power of God is working to bring about new life, and love and reconciliation will win in the end. Hallelujah.